All right, so welcome to another fantastic Fianna Rose event, in fact, conversation. Tonight, we're here to have a great conversation on crypto assets. What are they? Well, we decided to bring in Fianna Rose member and the CEO of Ripple, Brad Garlinghouse. Brad, thanks for joining us.
Absolutely, it's really good to be here.
Tell us a little bit about what we're going to discuss tonight, but don't give away too much.
I won't give away too much. Look, I think that we are at a inflection point in the industry of crypto where it has touched many things but hasn't quite emerged. And I think tonight we'll talk about, where it's come from, where I think it's going, why we're at an inflection point. It'll be good.
Love it. You heard it from the man, the myth, the legend himself, Brad. So as we like to say, strap in, get ready for another fantastic Fianna Rose conversation. Brad,
Thank you.
thank you. All right, let's get into the reason why we're all here tonight. We're all here tonight because we want to have a really interesting conversation on another zeitgeist topic, which is crypto assets. We're going to have a moderated conversation between Sean and Brad for about 40 minutes, and then we're going to open it up to all of you, 20 to 30 minutes of Q&A. The only thing that we ask is, out of consideration for your fellow Rose members, is that you ask one question and try to keep that question to, 15 seconds in your ask. And then that way we can all partake and ask more questions. So our moderator this evening is, Fianna Rose member, a dear friend, and the one and only Sean McManus. He is co-founder of M+D, which is an advisory firm which advises a number of media, technology, finance, and investment organizations on the intersection and interactive content and thought leadership programs. Before that, he used to be at The Economist magazine where he ran all their events. So, ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together and welcome my friend Sean McManus.
Thank you. Thank you, Pablo. All right. Thank you, Pablo. I'm not sure this is on. Thank you, Pablo. Thank you, Pablo, and the Fianna Rose team for having us here tonight. This is going to be fun. I am so excited to welcome to the stage the CEO of one of the largest crypto and blockchain companies in the world, and also a Fianna Rose member, Brad Garlinghouse.
Thank you.
So good to have you.
Absolutely.
All right. Let's get into it. Let's go. So we're going to have a short conversation, as Pablo mentioned, and then turn it over to questions. So please start to think about what you'd like to ask Brad. And by the way, how many people in the room are operating or investing in the crypto space? Okay, looks like over half. So we have a very sophisticated audience as usual, and we'll try to make this conversation both accessible and elite, which is the Fianna way. And Brad, you're very good at that. And by the way, when you ask ChatGPT to sort of talk a little bit about what Brad Garlinghouse is really like, it says you're just a pragmatic, kind of no hype, sort of plain-spoken Midwestern dude from Kansas.
Rock chalk. Let's go Jayhawks.
But
one out there. I know there's one out there. There she is. I met her on the way in.
But you're not fooling us, Brad. We know you're a killer. And case in point to that, just a very quick background, Brad joined Ripple as Chief Operating Officer in 2015 and very quickly became the CEO about a year later to focus the company on enabling fast, low-cost cross-border payments using blockchain technology. Ripple's network is used by many of the major global banks that all of us have heard of, along with the leading payment providers and financial institutions worldwide. Ripple also has a token called XRP, which is expected to go way up in 2026. You heard it here first, so you might want to get your phones out. XRP serves as a bridge to facilitate liquidity across different fiat currencies, and we can talk more about that in a minute. Before joining Ripple, Brad was at the intersection of tech and digital media, serving in leadership roles at Yahoo and AOL, and was the CEO of the popular file-sharing app Hightail. So let's give another round of applause to Brad Garlinghouse.
Thank you. I love this already.
We're just getting you warmed up. You just returned from Davos, just narrowly escaping the invasion of Greenland. So thank you.
We flew over on the way back. I saw there, stop, check it out.
Everything seems to be okay now. And we're going to get into the crypto conversations that you had at Davos in a minute. But what would you, this is a very typical sort of question to ask this week to CEOs. What was the mood like in Davos when this week, Brad?
Well, by the way, thank you for that introduction. It's great to be here. So I've been to Davos 6 or 7 times, and each year I feel like there's a belle of the ball. There's some thematic thing going on. Not surprisingly, the thematic, AI was the belle of the ball. Everything AI, you couldn't, avoid it. And I think that's, kind of the hype cycles that go through new technologies, and we're in the middle of that with AI. Not that it's not, I'm not even opining on where it is in the hype cycle, but it's certainly in that. The other dynamic, Trump obviously was there yesterday. And, this year I felt Davos was more political. And, there's some well-covered Howard Lutnick, Christine Lagarde walked out, Gavin Newsom, Scott Bessent, some good colorful shit that went on.
Yeah.
And so, that I thought was more so than some of the years I've been there. And look, the U.S. obviously, Trump is resetting some of the particularly European relations, and that was certainly at the forefront. I mean, for Ripple and all things blockchain, we engage in certain areas and kind of try to avoid others. And I ran into Gavin Newsom, and having been in California for 25 years, he said hi, and there's a photographer taking pictures, and I was like, oh shit.
You're not the only Californian who's been fleeing to Miami lately, so I know he's frustrated. But you did make news in terms of your interaction with Brian Armstrong, who many of you know, CEO of Coinbase and well known as a Bitcoin maximalist, right?
Yeah.
So just tell us, like our friend Michael Sarah, by the way, I don't think Michael's here tonight, but I know Rose member. Tell us a little bit about what happened on stage between you and Brian and how that played out.
Well, look, I'll start by saying there are only a few really large, consequential crypto companies in the United States. Coinbase is clearly one of them. In that context, I have a ton of respect for Coinbase. I have a ton of respect for Brian. Now, that being said, I think what was undercovered is there's some legislation that has been moving through first the House last summer, trying to get through the Senate, what's called a market structure bill. Mm-hmm. The fundamental thing that's trying to be addressed there is how should we regulate digital assets? Are they a commodity? Are they a currency? Are they a security? And Brian had some very strong reactions to the markup or the almost marked up bill that came out of the Senate Finance Committee Banking Committee last week. And I think almost all of the crypto community was behind the bill in a positive way. And that it's not perfect, but I'm fond of saying that perfection is the enemy of progress, or perfection is the enemy of good. There's no perfect bill, and the risk is by blowing it up, you end up with no bill. Mm-hmm. And the industry, people talk about the U.S. Trump talks about he wants the crypto capital of the world to be the U.S. It's not. Yeah. Like the U.S. is behind.
Yeah.
And so when I see that happen, that's super. I felt Coinbase was being a little selfish about their own circumstances. They derive a ton of money from a particular stablecoin, Circle stablecoin, and he kind of blew it up. And I'm hopeful that it comes back. Now the on stage part. Look, I think Brian probably would say the same thing about me that I said about him. Like there's mutual respect. Mm-hmm. But he definitely is all in on Bitcoin. Yeah. The only thing I'll say, publicly or semi-publicly about this, this is weird for me. So you run an exchange and about 50% of your trading volume is Bitcoin and 50% is other things. If half of his trading revenue is zero, you are fucked.
Yeah.
Like, so the idea of being a Bitcoin max, it's like, I don't get it. And like, I believe very much in a multi-chain world, there's going to be different technologies that solve different parts of industry problems. And I'm surprised by sometimes, yesterday on stage, he and I were on stage together with the finance minister from France, the CEO of Standard Chartered, and the Euroclear CEO. And he was advocating for, we left the gold standard, we should move to the Bitcoin standard.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't see that one coming, and I was like, huh. I'm not sure he enjoyed my reaction, but I also was just like, I don't know that that's helpful.
Well, I think your reaction was that there will be tanks in the streets to protect sovereign.
Yeah, I mean, look, what I said, and this is, I think, a really important point when you think about crypto. So, early on Ripple journey, this 2017 or 2018, we had Ben Bernanke, the former Fed chair, speak at one of Ripple's customer events.
Mm-hmm.
And Bernanke said something that really stuck with me. And his point was, this is, quite a few years ago in the crypto journey. He said, if the crypto industry thinks that they're going to disrupt or somehow change or restrict the ability for a country to control their own monetary supply.
Yeah.
And what he says, they will roll tanks in the street, because once you lose control of your monetary supply, you lose sovereignty.
Yeah.
And by the way, this has happened in a lot of countries, obviously not kind of G20 countries, but I'll pick on Argentina. We're here.
Right.
It's basically a dollarized country. It's been, the value of the currency has been reset to zero more than once in our lifetimes.
Yeah.
But I think it's an important point to understand that if a government can't control its monetary system, they cease to be an independent sovereign nation in a certain way.
Yeah.
And I think one of the mistakes the crypto community has made is fiat currencies aren't the enemy. The dollar isn't the enemy. The yen's not the enemy. These things are going to converge. And Ripple very much is trying to position ourselves as the bridge between decentralized finance and crypto and traditional finance. And that's why we build technology that are effectively bridges between those.
Yeah.
And I think that's the direction of travel. And I think those who think there's, one winner, that Bitcoin's going to be the new gold standard, I think that's just not, I don't think that's time.
Well, Brad, we're going to veer down a bit of a philosophical path, but isn't it true that a lot of these guys actually would celebrate the notion of no public sovereignty? Right? This is a different, this is the Balaji sort of network state, so anyway, we can.
Look, this is where I think, I may personally have strong libertarian beliefs. I may not. If you're building a business, you have to be pragmatic about what are sacrosanct rules. And, there's certain things that exist within not just the United States, but every major economy. If anybody here works in finance, you know what the initials KYC stand for. Know your customer. Do we really think we're going to allow anonymous transactions at scale? It's not going to happen.
Yeah.
And so I think the crypto community sometimes champions things that may be religiously compelling and interesting. But if we want these technologies to benefit society and democratize certain parts of it, give access to banking, give access to brokerage in a way that hasn't happened in the past, let's stop pretending we're going to fundamentally change basic principles of how the financial system works.
Well, you're obviously a decelerationist, and we'll see what happens.
Well, this is why ChatGPT, I guess, said that I was a
You're so pragmatic about it. It seems reasonable to me, but I'm sure we have some people in the room that might disagree. You said that Ripple will be the bridge between DeFi and essentially traditional finance. So Larry Fink, who, by the way, is really the guy who saved Davos this year. He's the co-chair, brought Davos back from kind of the brink of scandal after the founder, Klaus Schwab, was kind of exiting. And, representing BlackRock made a very profound quote this week, which was that the two mega trends that'll define our era are AI and tokenization. So, Brad, what does that say to you in terms of the embrace from the financial institution community about where we're going?
Well, I think we should dissect a little bit. Like, why is tokenization a big deal? All of us in our daily lives, we've become almost complacent to the friction that happens in various financial transactions. Ripple started in kind of solving this cross-border payments problem. If you're wiring money overseas, there's a lot of friction, it's slow, it's expensive. But when you think about a lot of financial transaction. There's a lot of middlemen, intermediaries that are taking, maybe it's very small amounts of money, but anytime you have an intermediary, it's slowing things down, it's costing you money. And what blockchain technologies fundamentally allow you to do is to remove intermediaries, which makes it faster and cheaper. And so tokenization, to me, is just the manifestation of moving parts of financial transactions, commercial real estate. I made the point yesterday at Davos. If you live in, let's say, Lawrence, Kansas, and you wanted to invest in commercial real estate in Miami, and you've got $50,000 to invest, you have no option. There's no way you can take that. You could buy a REIT, but that REIT's not going to just be a Miami REIT. So if you tokenize a commercial building here in Miami and you wanted to put $50,000 in a tokenized commercial real estate project, oh, okay, like that's easy to get your head around how that would work. So I think that when I talk about the democratization of investments, of banking, like that's what I'm talking about. When you tokenize things, it actually allows it to be managed for much less friction in terms of moving it, fractionalizing it. All those things become very easy.
And what role are these large financial institutions playing in that? I mean, we all are aware of kind of the crypto ETFs that have popped up over the last couple of years, but a firm like BlackRock, I mean, how important is it that they embrace this, and what does that do for Ripple?
Well, I mean, first, and how important is it that a BlackRock embraces it? I mean, I think you have to start and answer the question of Larry Fink, as one of the most prominent kind of leaders of financial services in the country, came out with kind of pro-crypto comments at the same time Jamie Dimon and Warren Buffett are saying it's rat poison.
Yeah.
That's a big deal, right? Because, it is particularly, I feel like, very clubby in the financial services business. Having somebody like Larry Fink endorse or at least not say it's rat poison, maybe it's a low bar expectation, but that in and of itself is a lot of progress. Now, the second thing is, I should know this off the top of my head, but BlackRock has trillions of dollars under management. I don't know, 1.56 trillion. Yeah, it's a big number. So, but you dissect that, all the amount they have under management, they can tokenize things on their platform, and they've started to do that in small scale. But even at a small scale, the Bitcoin ETF they launched was the most successful ETF that's ever launched in terms of capital coming in. And again, I think that's demonstrative of how much interest there is in these assets. And that luckily we've moved away from the Biden administration kind of war on crypto. And that did, I think, put the U.S. behind other countries. Mm-hmm. But I think that the BlackRocks and Larry Finks who are leaning in is an endorsement, and of course they have so many assets under management. If they start to experiment and roll things out, I think it's going to accelerate the adoption.
Game changer, yeah. So let's and I do want to dig into some of the current regulatory models that are emerging, and you've been making some public comments about some different acts that are going through Congress, so we'll ask about that. But you also started a bit of a frenzy on Twitter this week because you were liking some posts about your token XRP that people...
Sean's paying attention to the detail.
that people were really paying attention to. So first of all, tell us a little bit about the role that XRP plays in the broader ecosystem for you, and then talk a little bit about what happened on Twitter this week and how you respond to some of those kind of meme experiences.
Yeah. So let me, zooming out from it, I'll talk about kind of my view on crypto largely. Look, there's a lot of things happening in crypto. I think a lot of them have been net bad for crypto. So the NFT craze and the Bored Apes, like I personally... was like, listen, I don't see how that creates value. More recently, the meme coin craze, like, I don't really get it. I talk a lot about, like, I think any technology and any token, it has to have a real use case. It has to solve a problem, or I just kind of don't get it. I got a lot of shit years ago because I came out and said, in that context, I said something negative about Dogecoin. Uh-huh. This is the same time Elon Musk was talking positively about Dogecoin. And again, you got to understand, Dogecoin it was created as a pile of dog shit. Like that's the moniker. And it was a joke.
Yeah.
And I'm like, look, I don't think that's good. I said something about it's not good for crypto. Now, I will say Dogecoin now has enough liquidity and interest and momentum that I think it's here to stay. But most cryptos, if you don't have a use case, it's not solving a problem. Like, I don't get it. Ripple uses XRP to solve a cross-border payments problem. XRP is extremely fast on a per transaction. It's extremely low cost. And as much as I am bullish on Bitcoin, Bitcoin is not a payments tool. It's slow and expensive per transaction. And when you think about payment opportunities, not just for cross-border, but you get into AI payments and how you could have literally agents paying other agents. You could have micro payments of fractions of a penny. That is not going to be solved through a Bitcoin blockchain. Like, it's not technically pragmatic. So we very much think XRP can solve a lot of those problems, but I'll also be the first to admit there's things XRP is not good for. And you should, I mean, even at meetings in Davos, I'm like, look, you really should be talking to fill in blank. We're not really the right solution for you. Now, the last thing you asked about, look, I go on Twitter. I try to be careful about how I engage on Twitter or X, but I'll go on like certain tweets and and occasionally I'll retweet something. And some people got really excited because I liked some tweet that said something about
XRP millionaires should give back.
I didn't even know what that was. I mean, I don't pay enough attention. Like, I don't take it that seriously. I'm just reading it. There are people on the Ripple team in the comms group who get very upset when I do shit like that. But it's okay.
Brad, what are stable coins?
Stable coins are a tokenized version of a fiat currency. So, I mean, it's quite simply, today, 99% of the market of stablecoins is the US dollar stablecoin. The largest, most popular is Tether, non-domiciled US. The second most popular is Circles, which is called USDC. But these are digital representations of a dollar. By tokenizing them and digitizing them, they're easy, faster, cheaper to transact. I mean, one of the things that's interesting, which actually another Miami company or Miami-based company, MoonPay, they approached Ripple, actually at the Trump inauguration. They had a liquidity challenge and realized on a Sunday they needed $50 million. And you can't wire $50 million on a Sunday. Ripple loaned them, I mean, the CEO has talked publicly about this, so I'm not sharing anything he hasn't said, but Ripple loaned them $50 million for 3 or 4 days because they had a liquidity problem. If we hadn't had stablecoins kind of available, we couldn't have solved their problem.
Wow. Yeah. So where, I know you're really leaning into this technology, and so how does that play out for you from a corporate perspective?
Well, so when, our customers are banks, financial institutions, payment providers. I want as large a share of wallet as possible. And when we go to a bank or a payment company and say, hey, so we go to a customer and say, hey, we can solve your payments problem to get into the Philippines, let's say. You're going dollar to Philippine peso. Well, it could be that XRP is the best bridge asset for that purpose, or it could be that, no, a stable coin is going to solve that problem better. And what I don't want to do, I want the customer to be happy, right? Ultimately, I got to solve the customer's problem. If I'm not doing that effectively, then I don't get any of the share of wallet. So what we do at Ripple is we say, look, we're going to solve this problem. We're going to figure out, is XRP the best bridge asset, or is a stablecoin the best bridge asset? We launched our own stablecoin because there's a period of time where we were minting 20% of all USDC. We were using it in our payment flows for institutions. And we're like, well, wait a minute, if we're minting 20% of all USDC, we're the largest minter, why don't we enter this market ourselves? So we launched our own stablecoin just over a year ago. It's now about $1 billion. It's the 5th largest now at about $1.5 billion, and we're super happy with the momentum there.
So a lot of this is going to affect on what impact by what other countries are going to be doing. I mean, you made a comment early in this conversation where you said, the U.S. is quite behind the curve in terms of the adoption of crypto generally, and obviously stablecoins and other things. What, especially when you're at Davos, or if you're working on other parts of the world, what countries are you looking at as the real kind of forward-thinking models?
Well, I'd say two countries come to mind that leaned in early and have benefited from that in terms of, can you guys hear me okay? Is it going in and out? I can't really tell. Oh, that's even better. All right, thank you. Saul. Okay, there you go. I'll talk. Yeah. Okay, the two countries that come to mind that I think are probably most ahead, leaned in early, and provided regulatory clarity are Singapore and the UAE, United Arab Emirates. And both, I think, because of that, have attracted lots of entrepreneurs, lots of capital. Look, we set up offices and have a big presence in Singapore and Dubai because of that. Yeah. Where, for 4 years, we haven't covered this yet, but for 4 years, we were in a lawsuit with the United States government, and we basically didn't hire anybody in the United States for 4 years,
Right.
Because our customers were all overseas. I would say, I mean, we ultimately won that case, and it kind of reopened the ability to serve the U.S. market. But I think in both Singapore and UAE, I give them credit for kind of being forward thinking about it.
Well, it's interesting. I was going to ask you about that. I mean, these sort of city states that are kind of emerging. I mean, funnily enough, Miami is I think trying to also.
Now yours is.
Miami is also kind of trying to exist in that ecosystem, right? I mean, Singapore, Dubai, and somewhere like Miami, which feels like an international city-state in many ways, more than just an American city. So it is fascinating to see these sort of pockets, kind of pioneering. I mean, and that will just, from your perspective, only continue to accelerate.
Well, yeah. I mean, look, when I think about this, I spent a lot of years in Silicon Valley building product as a product guy. And we live in a competitive world. And if your product you're offering, in this case, I'll pick on San Francisco. Yeah. If the product being offered in San Francisco, in California, isn't compelling to entrepreneurs or investors, they're going to find the product that is compelling. I think, leaving politics aside, I think, again, whether you're left or right, Mayor Suarez leaned into this in a really compelling way. And, we very much wanted to bring entrepreneurs here, Ripple set up our office here 4 years ago, and we continue to hire here. That's good for this community. I think in my opinion, what you're seeing happen is the product being offered in California from a tax point of view and what have you, people are saying, well, I can switch to a different product.
Well, yeah, states can compete, and so and Miami's definitely benefiting from that. So I wanted to ask you about. So you were quoted in CNBC yesterday talking about the predicting a big crypto boom in 2026. You anchored those comments on a lot of the regulatory clarity that you see it playing out, right? So tell us a little bit about what are the specific what the specific legislation is. We have something called the Genius Act, and there's also something called the Clarity Act. So just tell everyone what those are. How are you advocating for these, and where do you see them going?
So first, I'll start by explaining why these things are so important. So if you are the CEO of a bank, you have lived through lots of regulatory dynamics where a government has come after you, and you've had literally billions of dollars of fines. I've got one funny story about that with the Ripple board. I'll tell it in a minute. But if you've seen the winds change based on who's in the White House or who's got control of the Congress, you don't want to engage unless you are certain that this is okay. So that means that without clarity, without certainty, there's a resistance to want to lean in. And certainly Ripple, our customers are banks, our customers are payment. They don't want to lean in at risk of what might happen if certain regulators decide that they don't like these technologies. So the Genius Act was really focused on solving a stablecoin clarity. So what kind of disclosures do stablecoins need to have? What kind of reserves do you have to have? If you own a stablecoin, the company issuing it, how many dollars does it have to have behind it? Things like that. That passed last summer and signed, I think, in August. Mm-hmm. Since that time, you've seen a massive increase in stablecoin payment activity. Ripple bought a small company called Rail, which is doing stablecoin payments, which is based in Toronto. And the demand for stablecoin payments has gone way up because you now have clarity. What we still don't have is when we talk about different digital assets, is it a currency? Is it a commodity? Is it a security? Ripple has that because we got sued by the government. We spent 4 years, $150 million fighting that lawsuit. At the end of it, we had a federal judge, one sentence she wrote said, XRP in and of itself is not a security. Uh-huh. We have certainty, we have clarity, we're good. Right. We can go forth. Okay. But the industry doesn't. And I think, Ripple will do well as the crypto industry does well. A lot of my energy is spent, I'm advocating for crypto at large. I want crypto to do well because I know if that happens, it's good for Ripple. What you've seen now is the Clarity Act had a lot of momentum. Last week, there's definitely some drama because Coinbase withdrew their support. And Coinbase is the largest US exchange. It only has about 5% global market share, but in the US, it's important. And when they withdrew support, the markup was canceled and kind of slowed things down. I think it will get moving again. I think there's kind of a compromise brewing between Coinbase and the banks that are concerned about certain things. But I think it's extremely, if we want the US to be the crypto capital of the world, it's not today. If we want it to be, we have to get a Clarity Act passed.
And off the record, why is Brian advocating against it?
Well, I think Brian wants the perfect bill, and I think the perfect bill is not going to happen. Right. The primary thing that Brian's concerned about is the yield on stablecoins. Yeah. About half of his revenue comes from a rev share deal with Circle. So if it screws that up, it's really bad for his company. And I get it, and I'm supportive and empathetic. I think sometimes, it would be useful to be a little more transparent that hey, the reason, because Kraken supports it, Gemini supports it. I mean, everyone else in the industry is really supporting it. And Coinbase, in my opinion, uniquely withdrew support, which I think hopefully it gets going again. But if it doesn't, and you get to midterms and then you have, maybe a mixed Senate, House, we'll see. But it'll be hard to get it going again if things change in the fall.
So we're going to go to questions in just a minute. Brad, one of your strategic priorities that you've expressed throughout the last few months and years is that the notion that Ripple will succeed in the future by branching out into new sectors. I mean, right now it's very much anchored in the financial industry, which of course makes a lot of sense. But what does it look like for the manufacturing sector, the automotive sector, the energy sector to start adopting this technology? What is that? So talk a little bit about how that rollout will look. How optimistic are you about the adoption across these sectors, and what are you doing to make it happen?
Well, we started with banks and payment providers. What you find is that if you are, any scaled operation, you're doing business overseas, your supply chain inevitably involves lots of countries. I was talking to a CEO at Davos who manages a $40 billion fashion empire, in effect. Mm-hmm. And he's describing their payment problem because they go from literally cotton, silk, to what countries are actually stitching, designing, stitching. And he was describing their payment challenges are profound. And so Ripple certainly, banks have been our first customer. We, for just over $1 billion, we acquired a company in Q4 called G Treasury. Mm-hmm. And G Treasury is like a dashboard for CFOs. And they have about 1,000 companies around the world that generally are between over 500 million of revenue. They orchestrated $13 trillion of payments last year. None of those were taking advantage of stablecoins or kind of Ripple crypto-enabled payments. I think what Ripple has done differently is where some in crypto have said, let's buy other crypto companies. Our view is no, we want to expand beyond. We want to, I view G Treasury as a massive distribution channel for Ripple's technologies. These are CFOs and treasurers who are moving, obviously, trillions of dollars. And we can start to gently introduce to them, hey, you're sending money to this currency at this time. We can actually do that better, faster, stronger through either a stablecoin or through an XRP payment. And the ability to introduce that slowly into, again, last year's $13 trillion, I think, is a really compelling opportunity.
Yeah, massive. I mean, is there anything slowing you down in this regard from a regulatory standpoint?
Well, yeah, regulation. I mean, oftentimes it's not even actual regulatory problems. I mean, Ripple has leaned into regulation. We have 75 licenses around the world. We have tried to make sure that anywhere we can get a license, we do get a license. But, you still have CFOs who are afraid. They're nervous because they read that, well, this may change and what have you. They read that, things like the Clarity Act are important for that certainty so that if the next chair of the SEC in the United States comes in, they don't, go to war again.
Right.
So that still slows down adoption for us and others in the industry.
All right. Questions from the audience?
Thanks for your time. I was wondering if you have any views on crypto. I mean, Bitcoin historically has been seen as digital gold, and that's been decoupled in the last, more than a year. Do you see that coming back? Do you see Ripple as digital gold and, crypto broadly, years to come? Will it be a hedge in the way that gold is?
So, the short answer, well, first of all, one thing I want to correct only because I dealt with a U.S. lawsuit. When do I view Ripple as a hedge? I view XRP as a hedge. And I always differentiate what is Ripple versus what is XRP. It's a habit now because of the lawsuit that I always make that clarification. All right. Look, I think the reason why I'm incredibly bullish on crypto at large is you can't trust governments to manage monetary supply in an expert way. The US is the best managed, and the US dollar has been devalued by 30% in the last 5 years. Now, inflation keeps coming down, that's good. But if you look out over the long haul of 30, 40 years, the value of the dollar has been devalued 90+%. So if you hear that, it's like, okay, so the case for non-inflationary assets, which would include to some degree gold, but certainly crypto, I think there's going to continue to become more and more capital flowing in. I am a little bit puzzled and surprised. So on a year-over-year basis, Bitcoin's down about 10 or 12%, XRP's down about 18%. And I'm surprised, right? When we're talking about, Sean mentioned ETFs. In the last 30 days, $1.5 billion has flown into XRP ETFs. Yet the price of XRP is down a little bit. I take that as just kind of a short-term, it'll be interesting how that plays out over the next year or two. And the number one thing, I was talking to some people at the kind of mixer, I encourage everyone to take a long view on these things. And I tell my closest friends, buy what you're comfortable buying and don't look at it for 3 or 4 years. And I promise you it's going to work out well because of these macro dynamics. Now, the last part of your question, look, I think Bitcoin is a fabulous store of value, and I think it kind of owns that space as digital gold. I think other assets will own other use cases. And I own some ETH. I own a lot of XRP. I'm very bullish on XRP in our use case, in part because you have a company like Ripple that is successfully executing and getting more and more financial institutions into that network.
Can you clarify in simple terms how you view the value of the XRP token versus the amount of transactions on the network? How do you convince us that it's actually an undervalued, non-security token?
Well, I convinced you it's non-security because a federal judge said it's a non-security, so I'll leave that alone. Look, at the end of the day, price is just going to be determined. For all digital assets, price is very simple, supply, demand. So XRP is a fixed supply, and it has increased, when the price is going to have is increasing demand. I think what you're seeing is the more we're able to drive the velocity, I say inside Ripple, we talk about XRP is our North Star. We want to drive trust in XRP, utility in XRP, and the velocity, meaning liquidity of XRP. If we do those things, you look at the history of mankind, the most liquid currencies are the most valuable currencies. And so I think about it as, look, if I'm getting more institutions driving more transactions and it's more useful, people are going to want to hold it. And the reason why currencies are most valuable because there's a lot of liquidity. They want to, in a moment of stress or crisis, they want to be able to get out of it or into it. In currencies or assets that don't have liquidity are assets people don't want to hold because they're worried about being able to get in and out of it. So, look, I feel good about the progress we have made. I think people forget that XRP was the second most valuable digital asset before the SEC lawsuit. I think as we hopefully continue to drive momentum of the payment flows and use cases that Ripple's driving, we've invested in, over $1 billion in other companies doing things in the XRP ecosystem. I think collectively that's creating a lot of tailwinds.
What's holding back blockchain technology from being used in everyday life? Meaning title insurance. That's a low-hanging fruit. IRA, third-party administration. These are all low-hanging fruit. It's all validation of property or transaction. What is holding that back? I thought it would have been replaced by now.
Yeah. Well, so look, I think that is fair. And obviously, one of the things holding it back is some of the regulatory stuff and that you didn't have clarity in the US. But it shouldn't surprise you. I mean, there's 2 countries that I can name top of mind that are building land registries on the XRP ledger. One is Colombia and one is the UAE. So, why isn't the US doing more around that? Well, look, there's a shit ton. I'm sure somebody in here in this room is in the real estate market. There's a lot of bureaucracy, and I'm always amazed how many things you have to sign, which feels a little like a joke. But it's going to take time, but you can't focus on that time until you actually have the regulatory clarity where people are willing to invest in that, and you have investors behind it, entrepreneurs behind it. But I think some of the things you're pointing out, I mean, title insurance, I'm gonna get in trouble. Title insurance is a scam. Like, it's outrageous what you pay. I'm sorry, somebody in this room is probably in the title insurance business. I just totally, anyway. I love title insurance. It's a great business. I take it back. All right, so I mean, if you have titles based on a blockchain, you have provenance as far back as the eye can see, it fundamentally changes title insurance. Now, on the other hand, somebody in the title insurance business who's making a ton of money and extracting that friction, that's an intermediary that I was talking about earlier, they might be fighting in Washington to prevent those things from happening. Well, I don't know enough about it to say, is that right that the banks are required? I don't know shit about that industry. So, I mean, look, maybe you should start the company to do this. Ripple will invest. We'll do it on the XRP ledger. I'm in.
Yeah, all right.
We're looking for brokering deals, playing at Rose.
I want to be 5%.
Buy a 5% Shark Tank startup.
So I have a regulatory crystal ball question for you. I'm a cross-border litigation lawyer, right? I just had a freeze order issued in the Netherlands to freeze a bunch of, millions of dollars in assets of a defendant, right? I can't do that with crypto most of the time. You talked about KYC, you talked about being like the intersection between DeFi and traditional finance. When we have bad actors that are using crypto to escape the system, what do you think the regulatory framework is going to look like to address that issue? And how long will it take to get there?
Wait, say that part
And
again.
how long will it take to get there?
Oh, how long will it take to get there? I don't know the last part. Look,
I don't know the specifics of what you're describing, but there are many centralized exchanges around the world, including the Netherlands, where you can have a regulatory or law enforcement freeze order, and some exchanges around the world will honor those. We have been involved with law enforcement for a long time, and we do our best to help when bad things happen, to get exchanges wherever they are in the world to, freeze those accounts while we sort out what's going on here. And the responsible good actors in crypto will honor those. Not everybody in crypto is a good actor, and there are non-custodial, meaning not a centralized exchange like Coinbase, but you can receive crypto on a wallet that isn't centralized. And that does get into, how in a crypto world, how do we think about KYC in that custodial dynamic? I mean, that's going to be interesting. As part of actually what was fought about in the market structure bill we were talking about earlier. Ripple doesn't really have a dog in this fight because we only work with regulated endpoints. We get licensed around the world. We only work with KYC'd accounts and KYC'd wallets. I view this as something that is a little bit, I think, overblown in terms of the size of the problem, because today the vast majority of bad actors still it's cash, right? And cash is anonymous, and you can walk around with it and move it, and But I think some of the stuff does need to be solved. The last thing I'll say with this, and there's a company called Chainalysis. The CEO used to be based here in Miami, which is it's a great company. They do the diagnostics and kind of understanding, what's going on blockchains and figuring out who owns what, and they're pretty good at identifying who the bad actors are.
I think that a lot of people shift to crypto due to the fact that governments printing a lot of money, the currency loses its value. And with Bitcoin, Ethereum, that's not the case because nobody controls it. XRP, to my understanding, it does hold by an entity and group of individuals, happen to be one of the main figures. Doesn't this hurt the very essential of the advantages of crypto, that it can be printed and it can be controlled by a centralized entity?
Do you know what the acronym DYOR means? Do your own research. One of the frustrating things about crypto is, in part because there's money involved, is it's not just misinformation, it's disinformation. You have people with bad intent. They're intending to spread. So look, the XRP ledger is open source, decentralized. Ripple controls 2% of the validators on the XRP ledger. We own a lot of the XRP, but it's not a proof of stake blockchain. So ownership of XRP does nothing for the governance. It's used a technology called consensus to determine whether or not a transaction goes through, and it uses validators. Ripple controls 2% of the validators. The 98% are controlled by, maybe somebody in this room. Like it's very decentralized. So the idea that Ripple controls XRP is just, frankly, it's part of the reason why we had a US government court case, and we had to prove that that isn't true. And by the way, just to the Amsterdam question back there, I was going to give this as a proof point on this, and this is a kind of a sad story. About 18 months ago, the founder of Ripple was hacked. $150 million of XRP was stolen. Now, if we control XRP, wouldn't we fix that? It's gone. The guy lost $150 million of crypto. Now, some of it was recovered because of centralized exchanges. They were frozen. We worked the FBI, blah, blah, blah. But anyway, I'm using that example, which is kind of the woman's point in the back about the Amsterdam example. But I'm using it to prove the point. This comment in the kind of on Twitter, you read that like XRP is centralized. It's just bullshit. Like, it's just fundamentally not true. I stopped commenting and responding to those people because it's not worth my energy.
Hi, Brad. Just a quick question. Why would I choose your currency instead of Solana? And how would you compare the two?
Look, what I honestly tell my close friends is, I'm not here to convince you to buy XRP. What I would tell you is buy the top 5 and hold them for the next 5 years, and you're going to do great. So I'm not going to, I own a little bit of Solana. I'm not one of these people who's an XRP maximalist. I'm bullish on a bunch of cryptos for a bunch of reasons. Solana obviously leaned into the meme coin activity, and it drove a lot of liquidity. I was talking about what are the things that drive currencies. Solana drove a lot of liquidity because of the meme coins being built on the Solana L1. I'm not going to try to convince you of that because I'm like, look, buy both. I don't, and I think Solana will probably do well. I think XRP is going to do well, and I think depending upon how things play out for Ripple versus the Solana Foundation, we'll see which does better. I don't consider Solana a competitor. I'm friendly with them. There's others that I would say we compete with maybe a little more than that. I root for Solana for sure.
Hey, Brad, thanks so much. Thanks, John. Great conversation. Brad, I'm curious, you joined Ripple so early, right, as COO and then CEO. What signal did you see? What did you see in the market that made you really want to double down on this, and specifically in this way?
I really do like this question because I think, I was talking to some people during the mixer over here, and I think you have to be a little bit contrarian. But when I joined Ripple, I had the opportunity to join Travis Kalanick, the former CEO of Uber, as a friend, and he wanted me to join Uber. And Uber, this was a long time ago, and Uber wasn't what it is today, but it was clear, Uber already was a big success. I could have jumped on that, and I'm sure it would have been a fun experience and done well. But it wasn't, that was definitely not a contrarian. It was kind of okay, jump on the bandwagon, let's do it. And at that point in my career, I felt like I wanted to take a risk. If using a baseball metaphor or analogy, Uber would have been a single or double. The likelihood when I joined Ripple that it was going to do as well as it has, it was about 1%. But if it worked, it's holy shit, this is really having an impact in the world. And, I was at a point in my career where I wanted to take that bet. I wanted to take that risk. The signal, I don't know. Bitcoin already hit. I purchased my first Bitcoin in 2012. I sold half of it when it went up 10x because I was like, holy shit, this is incredible. I always thought the Achilles heel of Bitcoin was going to be their anti-bank, anti-government ethos. And I sit here today and I'm like, look, governments aren't going away, banks aren't going away. And when a recruiter called me about Ripple, their pitch was kind of we're trying to be like a Bitcoin, but working with the system. And that resonated with me. So it was definitely I was willing to take a big risk. But I think there's a lot of new technologies, right? I've always kind of been on the cutting edge or bleeding edge of what was going on. Sometimes I got that wrong. One chapter that didn't get covered in the introduction. I was at a company called Dialpad in 2001, which is pre-Skype. and it was trying to do voice over IP stuff. And it was interesting, but it was so early, and guess what? It was a disaster and lost it all.
Yeah. So earlier you talked about the experience with the former CEO of Ripple, and I'm wondering, even as experienced users are like finding themselves like being victim to phishing, hacking, and like even losing access to some of their assets. What do you consider to be like the sacred golden rules for like end users about how to keep or like even secure their assets digitally?
Well, I'll a little known fact, which is we intentionally tried to not make public, is in 2017 I got hacked, and it was a SIM port. If you guys, that is harder to do now, but I was out to dinner in New York City and my phone stops working. And what I didn't realize is somebody had, pretended they were me and called up and ported my phone number to another phone. Wow. At that time, your two-factor authentication was generally through SMS, and so they didn't use that to get into my Gmail account. And you got my phone and my Gmail, and you can do a lot of damage. My number one thing is I use Google Auth. I invest in, be willing to do those. It slows me down. Totally worth it. That's one thing. You don't use SMS as a two-factor. Use an auth account. There's different. Google Auth is what I use, but there's other examples. The other thing I would say is, look, be paranoid. Like the phishing stuff is outrageous, and it's only going to get better or worse. Whatever. It's getting more effective through AI technologies. People in this room. Well, in some ways, everyone in this room is going to be targeted. One other quick observation that is kind of interesting. When I got hacked, they went after the whole Ripple leadership team. And what we realized is one of the senior leaders at Ripple is a guy named Patrick Griffin. There's like 100,000 Patrick Griffins in the United States. You can't find personalized information about him. There's only one Brad Garlinghouse. Another guy got hacked at Ripple is a guy named Ashish Burla. Very unique spelling of that name. Guess what? He got hacked successfully because they could go after him. So if you're Sean McManus, there's probably a handful of Seans, harder to do that. If you're, I was going to pick on some random names in the audience, but having a generic name is a good defense to getting hacked. So go change your name.
Change your name.
Thanks. I had a question I was going to ask, and then you said something which even prompted it a little bit more. So I got into buying Bitcoin 4 or 5 years ago, and at the time I was convinced that it's impenetrable. You can't break into it for all these reasons. Over the last 4 or 5 years, with the supercomputing, and you hear about now maybe they can break into it. And then you mentioned when you were up there that your partner got broken into. Help me understand where that's going and how to give the common investor the certainty that if it's with Coinbase or one of those, that it's going to be.
Well, look, I think the centralized exchanges like Coinbase, like Gemini, like Kraken, I think have done a very good job of securing assets. And there are many, many, many billions of dollars stored on those platforms. And the biggest risk is you doing something stupid and clicking on the wrong phishing thing. So part of your question, I think, is about just protection. The other part is, I think, the macro quantum. Some people would say that quantum computing is going to change cryptography at its very nature. And I think there is risk about that over the next 5-10 years. But let's bring that back to reality for a second. Okay, so that means if I can break cryptography, I can go into JP Morgan. All bets are off. Forget about, the question is specific to crypto. And whoa, hold on a second. Now JP Morgan's at risk, Fidelity's at risk. The world will change. And my guess is what happens is, as fast as quantum is able to do these things, people use quantum computing to encrypt things at a whole level we haven't even considered. So I don't actually lose a lot of sleep about this, because if you can decrypt anything, I don't actually think the 3 trillion market, which is crypto, is going to be the target first. There's going to be other things that people go after at scale. The NSA is in trouble. You're going to see all kinds of things about Kennedy that we never knew existed. Mm-hmm. That was supposed to be a joke.
Well, all right. So I'm just going to end on a lighter note. One of the really fun things that you learn reading Brad's Wikipedia page is that he became quite famous while at Yahoo for penning something called the Peanut Butter Manifesto, which was meant to share with his team that you want to focus on your core business instead of spreading too thin like peanut butter. So my only question, Brad, is in an age of decentralized finance, do you still follow the Peanut Butter Manifesto?
100%.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you. Round of applause for Brad Garlinghouse.